Start with the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, welcome everybody. For the roll call, let the record reflect that all members present. And we'll start with board chair comments. So I have 4 quick comments today. So graduation's next week. So congratulations to our seniors and the 2 board members that have seniors graduating this year. Congratulations to you as well. Scholarships. I talk about that most times as we begin. We gave out another $600. That was just a quick turn from this semester there, but I'm really looking forward to doing and seeing how many payments are made between now and then. So that's awesome. I want to say a big thank you to the Royalton Lions, the Royalton Fire Relief, the Burnix, and the Initiative Foundation, and we'll talk about those all later, but donations this month for just over $10,000 to students and to staff. So that's some great support. And then I just want to say thank you to everybody for your work this school year and sustaining the drive here until we transition into the summer maintenance season. So it's the next couple weeks of high payoff targets for the kids here. So with that, I will take an approval of the agenda.
Second, Chair.
Tyron. Second, Director Hackett. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, motion carries. Appreciation, recognition, and presentations. We have a few of those today.
Chairman Hofstad, members of the board, Superintendent Dr. Werkamp. I have a number of awards. I guess I don't understand what a pre-meet is for track. I guess it's just a practice. And so my students of the month are not here tonight and they maybe could have been. So I apologize for that, but I want to recognize them anyway. They will also be recognized at the student recognition banquet student recognition ceremony next week. March 2024 student of the month, Bailey Beckers. She will also have an article in Record. They're going to be doing a feature article on her because she's planning to go to school to be a medical examiner, which they felt was just interesting. And so they're going to be doing a feature article on her in the Morris County Record, thinking it'll be coming in this weekend. 2024 April student of the month, Claire Procott. And the May 2024 student of the month, Kylie Wotashik. All 9 of the students of the month will be eligible for the student of the year scholarship presented also next week at the student recognition ceremony. On May 1st, we attended the Sourcewell Educators of Excellence banquet. We were very highly decorated at this banquet. It was a lot of fun. We had a teacher of excellence, a pillar support staff member of excellence. And then for the first time ever, Royalton had 2 innovative teachers of the year, which are kind of the big, it's like, director of the year and picture of the year at the Oscars. It was that kind of award, and they had a feature videos of those 2 teachers. If you haven't seen them already, they're very, very well done. And it really felt cool to sit there and have your people recognized in that way. They spoke very well for themselves and for their classrooms and students and for the school district. And so I was excited to be there with them. The 2024 Sourcewell Teacher of Excellence Award winner was Alyssa Garrett. She's in the Apostle Islands today, enjoying the sun, and so she's not with us. And I told her, I don't know if I don't know, that's a choice, it's a tough choice to make. John Koenig and Dr. Lake Matheson were the 2 Innovative Teachers of the Year. It's the first time in 4 years that that award has been given outside of Crow Wing County. Last year it was given to a teacher in the Crosby Ironton School District. And so they, like I said, they really did a really nice job presenting themselves and representing our school. So the Innovator Teachers of the Year, John Koenig and Lake Matheson. And then our pillar, Sourcewell Pillar of Excellence, is David Lem. He was nominated. I nominated him for this award. For many, many years, David has been our tech coordinator, and there is, if you just look at every room, if you take one of the tiles of these ceilings out and look at the wire and the stuff that goes through this building and the amount of technology, communication, and there is very little that does not have David's name stamped on it and that he doesn't know about. And that goes from intercoms to the smart boards to all of the technology that happens in the classrooms, Wi-Fi. And he keeps those systems running so the 920 students that we have going to school and the 100 and some teachers and other support staff can do their jobs. And it is remarkable how few times that amount of technology is ever disrupted. I mean, when the power goes out, obviously, and I mean, he's only partially to blame for that most of the time. He is kept that. It is remarkably very, very few times that I can recall in 15 years as principal, and for the amount of time that I've worked with him, that I can recall a time where there was a problem with technology happening that David did not have an answer. On top of that, he's very responsive to staff, and he's dealing also with all of the Chromebooks and all of the teacher computers and computer labs, the printers, which are probably the biggest headache. He is very responsive and quick to solve issues. I remember starting as a teacher in Royalton, and I had an old desktop computer. And when you logged in the morning, you had to get here at like 7:15, because by the time I went through the login, it was like 8:12. It was right just in time for class, you could get on the computer. And we have come a very long way, and a lot of that is due to David's leadership. So the 2024 Pillar of Excellence to David Lem. All the way through them, or are we doing?
Sure. Have the members of the board, Superintendent Dr. Werkamp. I'm doing elementary school nominations for Teacher of Excellence and Pillar of Excellence. I will say this is kept hush hush. We're not supposed to tell them. They want to notify. So I nominate, and I don't say anything to them. And when the email came through, David does a good job with these security stuff. They all thought it was spam. And like, is this legit? Like, am I supposed to click on this? And is this real? So we got him there, and I have two fine people for this. First Teacher of Excellence is Hannah Toma. Hannah's a 4th grade teacher for us. She's took on student council. She's active in the PLC process. She's as AD, she took on coaching. She's done so much for our school. She's a great relationship builder with our kids. She's a great colleague, and so this year's 2024 Sourcewell Teacher of Excellence is Hannah Toma. Come on up. This year again is new. This Pillar of Excellence. Oh, don't go too far. You get the picture taken. Pillar of Excellence is the first time that they've done this, is where we've nominated people outside of the educator teaching profession. And it was a no-brainer. We have a lot of great people in our buildings, but what Lisa has done coming into my first year, what she knows about our school, how she handles things, she's able to communicate. If you've done pickup line, she can look at your vehicle 15 cars back, and she knows exactly who's coming out, so she can rattle them off and the kids are ready. So from an efficiency standpoint, she's a lead in the title program. She assesses kids in Fastbridge, and the relationship that she builds go a long ways into helping our kids improve, not only in the services that we provide, but in supervision, and kids respond. And that's just a testament of how well she has built those relationships. So I can't think of a better candidate. 2024 Pillar of Excellence, Lisa Tasto. Okay. Picture?
Only have to have board members do it once.
A lot of tripping hazards today too.
Correct.
Chair Hofstad, members of the board, Superintendent Dr. Bergkamp. Caitlin Frenchek activities, I'll rattle through mine because I have the most. First off, I'll do our FFA winners. They're not here because they're actually out picking up road ditches. So we have a couple of teams that did well as some individuals. Ashley Betker, Brooke Gromitz, and Abigail Nelson received their Minnesota FFA stake degree. This is the highest award given to an FFA member by the state, so they have a big application that they have to do and then submit. Abigail Nelson received second place in the regional meets evaluation competition, and Ashley Betker received third. As a team, they won first place, and I'm not sure how they did at state, but they did pretty well at state. And then Isaac Check received second place in the region for dairy evaluation, and Carson Pop received third place in the region for egg mechanics contest. And I believe their team also won first place for the egg mechanics. So they attended the state FFA convention, which was in the end of April. All right, and then on to speech. We sent three students in two different categories to the state speech contest, which was held at the end of April. Muna Ture placed 7th in storytelling, and Stella Hagen and Nate Moga placed 6th place in duo interpretation. And if you follow social media, they were constantly doing well at the invitational, so. And our other one is for robotics. Our robotics team got an invitation to attend the VEX Robotics World Competition. This is a great accomplishment because not everyone gets that invitation, so they did go down to Dallas. They represented Royalton well, and they also seem to have a good time. So members are Ezra Callis, Luke Brunquist, Samantha Roaring, and Jenna Zimmerman. And that's it for mine. So you might as well make these 4 be the first one. Hello?
Right, so no, you're fine. It is the shortest spot. You guys do that way here? Yeah, you want to play that. All right. Good job, you guys.
Yeah.
Congratulations. All right, Stella, you're next. Sorry, do I have to come down? Is that what you're doing? So Michelle, you're gonna tell me. No. Okay. Yep, right in the middle.
Upside down.
We'll put it in the folder. There you go. Thank you. All right. Teachers, and then David. David's on teachers. Just like that. Okay, together. Yeah, David wants to come up with this one. There you go. Congrats.
Right, next is recognition of citizens for input purposes. All right. Board committee reports, finance.
Finance. Committee met on Wednesday, April 24th. Well, April enrollment is down just a little bit from March. We're at 907, or we were. We discussed some of the preliminary budget that we're gonna go through tonight briefly, and we discussed some various funding streams, some of the revenue totals we have, how we find some various expenses, how we fund some of the various expenses like mid-states, and maybe some of our options are. And most of this information will be repeated by Heidi when she gives her report.
Awesome, thank you. For mid-state, we meet this Wednesday, so there's nothing there. But most likely I'll be taking a couple asks to them as well. From that, and then policy.
I didn't bring it.
Yeah, there's only a couple things of significance, and really for most anybody that's out there is 902 is use of school district facilities and equipment, and the addendum that goes with that. We're completely revamping that with Amy, to look at how we use the schools, who can use the schools and the facilities, and to make it much easier than the cumbersome process that it is right now to figure out if this checks this block and then you get this one, then you can go to the third spreadsheet and do that. So,
It ain't gonna be perfect when we pass it either.
no, but it'll
It'll
be
get better.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's really it. Most of the rest of the stuff is very minor stuff where they're talking about, writing out numbers or, the statute or CFR, writing that out. So, and I'll talk about those a little bit more once we get to that. Anything to add?
No, I'm good.
Superintendent report.
So I just let everybody know that the Assistant Commissioner Angela Mansfield from MDE came today and did a site visit. And so I'm proud to wear my bracelet made by second graders in Miss Brenny's class. I had their store today. It cost me $1 of Brenny bucks. So it's very nice. She was quite impressed at our second graders and their business acumen. And then over here, we showed her our life skills lab along with our science classrooms. And you know, those are the envy of most science teachers around our state because we have incredible space here. So she spent a little over an hour with us today, and they're doing this with every district, visiting them all. It's their new thing. And then I just wanted to let you know, we had our strategic planning committee meeting, and I'm going to show kind of where we're at with the communications plan that we've been working on through that process with that committee. We're getting really close to having a really positive document. So through all this work, and thank you, Nicole, for your artistry here and designing the actual look of this. We had two options and the committee settled on this. Our purpose is the purpose of the Royalton School District Communication Plan is to ensure all stakeholders receive timely and effective communication so they have the best possible experience at Royalton Public Schools. Now we've listed off the stakeholders and then the channels with which they communicate. Then we have a contact us button. So through this conversation with the committee, the group came up with this. If you click on Royalton Voice, this will actually be a link behind it where somebody can go ahead and contact us that way. If you go to the back there and click on phone numbers, it's going to take you to our staff directory. So you're gonna be able to either pull them in by name or building, or they're all listed at the bottom alphabetically. Phone numbers and emails tie to those. The commitment to communication, we will have links for those as well on coaches and teachers and talking more about like how they might communicate. That work hasn't been completed yet. We're still working on that. But we do have a how-to button, and I was really glad the committee came up with this idea. This is where you can click and it'll tell you how to use these particular systems. So if you want to click on that first one, Skyward fees and annual registration, it gives the how to go through the process if somebody needs a tutorial. So we're continuing that work. Again, it's not completely done, but we're really getting a lot closer than we had been. And our next meeting, we decided we kind of really want to wrap this up this June, so that next fall we can start concentrating more on back to the original strategic plan and looking at priorities and the action steps. So we do have a meeting coming up June 24th at 6 p.m. So the committee will come back together and hopefully we'll have more of these ready to go for the ones. But I just thought I'd show you that, and if you have any questions or any of the committee members, I know Angela and Maria, you were both there, if you have anything to add.
Yeah. Just some of the discussion was that sometimes it's hard to find what you're looking for on the website. So, or when we changed and update what kind of, like how you pay for sports and whatnot, people were struggling with remembering. So that's kind of how that how-to was born. So if you can't remember, if you've only done it once in the fall and you come back to it in the spring, you can't remember. There's just simple ways to find it.
Awesome. That's a great step forward. And helpful. Business manager report.
Good evening, Board Chair Hofstad, members of the board, Dr. Christine Camp Herman, Heidi Hagan, Business Manager. So this presentation is our regular monthly school board update. And so fiscal year 2024, May budget update, board meeting information, continue to track enrollment. As you can see, the month of April enrollment was around 907 students. Down just a little bit from the previous month at 910 students. We continue to track it monthly, paying attention to the fact that our funding is based on average daily membership. And so we budgeted that around 920 ADMs. I'm still confident that although our enrollment has decreased some, it is still within that average daily membership, taking into account the students' enrollment throughout the entire year. General fund revenues, this is as a month end March, on track at 66% of total budgeted revenue in the general fund. That will continue to change as we go further into the months. However, with the goal that by the end of June, we will be at or around 100%. Similar with general fund expense, again, on track as budgeted for the current fiscal year's revised budget at 69%. Taking into account that the biggest factor in monitoring monthly general fund expense comes in the form of salaries, wages, and benefits, being over 70% of our total general fund budget. Those are on track as a percentage of the budget and as compared to previous fiscal years. Again, continuing to monitor with the goal that at the end of June, that total percentage is around 100%. Any questions on the monthly budget update?
I just want to scroll back up. There, when it was written out, I think I know which one's which, but they're both marked on both slides, the expenditures and the revenues. The first, like fiscal year 2024 is marked revised budget and also revised budget.
Yes,
Should it be
original budget in the
and then
very
revised?
left
It
column.
was far left.
Yes,
Okay.
and thank you for pointing that out. I will make sure to update that
Okay.
next round.
Sure.
But correct, it's comparing the original and the very far left numbers column and compared to the revised that next.
Okay.
budget. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Heidi. Principal report.
Chair Hofstad, members of the board, Superintendent Werekamp, three very quick little items. One choir concert, the last choir concert of the year, Wednesday, May 15th, 2 days from now, 7 PM cafeteria. Senior class trip. This Sunday to Craigan's, they'll leave at 8:30 in the morning. Stay at Craigan's overnight, and then they will be coming back and return back to Royalton about 2 o'clock on Monday afternoon. And then, graduation next Thursday. Will be the graduation for the class of 2024. Everyone got their information, the packet, seating arrangement. Okay. If you have any questions between now and then, please give me a call, but otherwise we look forward to having you participate in the graduation ceremony next week.
How many graduates do we have?
If everything goes the way we want it to go, 74. I wish there was a year that I was just like, I could tell you right now, 74 people are gowning. I'll probably know 20 minutes before you guys get there, and unfortunately.
Sure.
Any questions? Thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
Chair Hassan, members of the board, Superintendent Dr. Werkamp. Just a couple things here as we round out May. We are done with MCA testing. Fast bridge testing is wrapping up here as well, so we're getting that done, which we're ahead of the game for that legislative mandate for fast testing, so that's good. And then we're gearing up towards the end of the year. We got different groups going different places. They're having fun learning on those field trips. They're not just fun field trips, so that's great. And then rounding out the end of the month, we get crazy busy here as we enter these last couple weeks. Our kindergartners are very excited to cross over the river on Thursday, the 30th here at 9 AM in the cafeteria, where we get to celebrate them. And then the next day, we get to celebrate our fifth graders crossing over back across the river to this side for their graduation, 8:30 AM in the elementary school gym. And then everyone gets to ring the bell. And from then on, it's gonna be a fun field day. Royalton PTO is doing their field day in connection with our school-wide celebration. So we'll kind of have that area locked down north of the school where kids get their fun time, and we'll get to celebrate our school year on that last day. We are also gearing up for ESY and targeted services starting in June 10th. So it's coming up very, very quick. So we're still kind of getting some registrations in for that, but we're rolling along. So any questions?
Thanks, Tony. All right, next is consent agenda approval, so at any point, a director can pull an item off the consent agenda for further discussion. So it's approval of the regular board meeting minutes, the special meeting minutes, claims, accounts, and financials. Approval of resignations and terminations, and approval of new hires. Anybody have anything that they'd like to pull?
Motion to approve.
Thank you. Director Bellman,
Second.
second by Director Hackman. Any discussion?
I have a couple questions
Sure.
on some of the claims, accounts and financials. And I'm not sure who's gonna be the one that's gonna be able to provide the answers. On our time card archive document, I was just looking through, and I was wondering if there's a standard of a minimum mileage that we have that you can accrue before you submit for reimbursement. I just seen some minor, like 90 cents and $2, like there's no minimum standard, so they get issued a check for that reimbursement, or is it? Okay, just was wondering if we had precedents that we could set, or not really.
You have to pay it.
Oh, well, right, I know, but I didn't know if you had to, maybe accrue to $5 or you accrue to a certain amount of mileage.
It typically goes into payroll, so it's not like an individual check if they're an employee.
Sure, okay. Sounds good. My next question was on, the check register. when things are listed under Amazon Capital Services, that's just a credit card purchase through Amazon, is that correct?
We have a district Amazon business account and any purchases through that account is Amazon Capital, which is an online. Would be a check payment to Amazon for invoices of items that have been received.
Sure, okay, and specifically the one that I wanted to ask more on, and I don't know who could answer this question, is I see a charge for building thinking classrooms in mathematics, and I was just wondering if this is a curriculum that Royalton is using. And how long we've been using it, and maybe what grades are implementing this curriculum in? Or if anyone could enlighten me on what that specific purchase was about?
Our
Anybody
building
knows?
thinking classrooms is some professional development books that the math teachers were looking at in terms of, it's not curriculum. They're not teaching from it, but it is like instructional practice to professional development.
And then the only other question I had on the check register was the charge for school management services for the $36,700 and some odd dollars. Was that part of our contracted service, or is that above and beyond an additional expense?
Contracted service.
Okay, thanks. That's all the questions I had.
Thank you. Anybody else have questions? All right, I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye, all opposed. All right, motion carries. All right, into discussion items. First is the Iowa renewal resolution. Does somebody want to introduce this?
I'll introduce it.
Director Hackett. So Director Hackett introduced the following resolution, whereas Superintendent Christine Weirkamp to be the identified official with authority, education identity and access management security system for the Royalton School District. Be resolved by the Royalton School Board to approve Superintendent Christine Weirkamp Herman to be the Iowa and EDIAM. Business Manager, School Management Services, Scott Marine to be,
That's not right.
oh, so we gotta see that.
Yeah, it should be Heidi. We corrected that. How did that one get uploaded?
Yeah, it says Heidi up there.
Yeah, so I don't know. What you, I have it on.
That's an early copy.
You must have the wrong, okay. 'Cause I'm like,
So Heidi had.
I was gonna say, I know.
Official
Yeah.
with authority proxy for the Royalton School District. Be resolved by the Royalton School Board to approve business manager Heidi Hagan. Oh, next one says Heidi Hagan to be the Iowa proxy. So,
yeah, the same.
the motion for adoption of this foregoing resolution was duly seconded. I'll second it by member Hofstad. And upon a roll call vote, will be taken there on third.
Director Hackett,
Aye.
Director Hofstad,
Aye.
Director Trout. Aye. Director Bond.
Aye.
Director Boyd.
Aye.
Director Roy. Aye.
All right, thank you. Great. The motion and resolution was approved the 13th day of May. All right. Thank you. FY 25 budget review.
Chair Hofstad, members of the board, Dr. Christine Weirkamp Herman. I am presenting the fiscal year 24-25 preliminary budget. The information that we'll go over tonight, I'll go through it in its entirety, and then we'll pause at the end for questions. Nicole, if you want to go to, yeah, make it bigger. That would be good. Can you take it out of the slide model and do the full presentation? Yes, click on that cross X.
Okay.
So you can just scroll. This is just a table of contents that we'll be reviewing all funds. 1 general fund, 1, 2 food service fund, fund 2, community ed fund 4, debt service fund 7. This is a look at all funds summarized, and we'll look into greater detail further into the slides. However, this is a look at the total revenues and expenditures, both just under 15 million total of all funds, which results in a preliminary deficit of about $145,000. We'll talk more about what that looks like in future slides. If you want to go to the very last page. So what I do is I work backwards, starting with Fund 7. This is our most simplest fund when it comes to budgeting both expense and revenue, because it is based strictly on statute and our current debt service. And so therefore, we are required by statute to fund revenue at 105% of our total debt service annual payments, and our debt service annual payments are based on our debt schedule. So overall, our debt service is just over 2 million, as is our revenue, for a net surplus of about 57,000. That equates to just over 26% fund balance in Fund 7 debt service, which remains consistent year over year, pending any large bond transactions, etc. Next is our Community Education Fund, which is Fund 4. Again, preliminary numbers. You'll see this information all again in June, as well as I continue to work through the budgets, keep up to date on current legislation, etc., and any other current funding resources and our expenditures that might yet not be known. As far as community education goes, the preliminary fiscal year 25 budget is looking at about a little over $70,000 deficit, which equates to a fund balance of around just under 47%. Overall, again, preliminary, and why I say that is our revenue at about 507,000 is, in my estimation, a conservative approach. We do not know yet the outcomes of the pre-voluntary kindergarten application that was submitted. That won't come out until end of May, maybe even early June, in where we applied for 40 additional VPK seats. And the likelihood is that we might be funded with those, and depending on what that looks like, that could be a substantial increase in our revenue here in the Community Education Fund. Next is Food Service Fund 2, consistently maintaining a positive net surplus of just under 35,000, maintaining a very conservative approach to our revenue, keeping that the same as it is this year, again, knowing that we have state funded and federally funded free meals and participation projected to be similar. So keeping revenue at that 757,000, taking into account slight increases in expense. Again, the outcome of about a $35,000 surplus, maintaining a fund balance of around 31%. And then go up one more slide. So now we're talking specifically about the general fund, our largest fund, which consists of general fund, scholarships, and student activity funds, all under the general fund in total. Percentages of expense, a slight increase, just under 2%. And again, keeping revenue conservative at this time with the assumption of our average daily membership of around 910 students based on our current year trend. We talked in Finance Committee about where that ADM number should be. And at this time, we feel 910 is conservative and can continue to monitor that until final budget is presented in June. That results in a very nominal increase in revenue of 0.27%, which results in a deficit of about 165,000 in the general fund projected preliminary for next fiscal year. You want to scroll down to the next slide and you'll want to minimize that. So this is a look at the general fund in just a little bit different format. This is breaking up the types of funds, whether they're restricted, and revenue and expense is solely based on statute. Unassigned fund balance, and then any assigned funds that were set aside in previous fiscal years to account for specific expenditures. For example, on this slide, we are seeing that the assigned funds for reading specialist, as the board had approved during the COVID time, to be set aside, knowing that COVID funds would eventually end. And the intent of that position was to be able to maintain that going forward for a few fiscal years with those assigned funds. And then again, spending down reserved funds based on statute, which would result in an unassigned fund balance projected for next fiscal year of about 14.8%. Our policy is between 14 and 20%, so nearing that lower end of our board policy. I believe it's my responsibility as the business manager and my job to provide additional information on what the board may want to consider. Given this situation, we're looking at a spend down in unassigned funds of about $135,000 from this fiscal year. So 1.89 million down to 1.8939 million down to 1.704 million. Again, resulting in $135,000 unassigned fund balance decrease. The board may choose to be comfortable with that, but as I had stated, it's my job to provide you with some considerations. And so with that, I will go to the next slide, which would be back on the agenda. It's a unassigned fund balance scenarios. Perfect. And so this is specifically looking at where we're at currently at fiscal year 24. We're using assigned funds, as I had mentioned, for reading specialists, both this fiscal year and consideration next fiscal year. That adjusts our fiscal year 24 unassigned fund balance to just over 1.8 million, which is about 16.2%, which falls within board policy of 14 to 20%. In addition to my job paying specific attention to board policy, state statute that drives how we spend money and code our revenues, there is a policy with regards to order of resource use. Taking into consideration what that also might look like and what the board might be comfortable with considering. Go to the next slide. Possibilities yet this fiscal year, as the year end nears, we can use Safe Schools money to spend down Safe Schools balance, which would be eligible for the rekeying and the door server upgrade. We also have an opportunity to consider additional Safe Schools dollars to allocate towards other state statute driven Safe Schools eligibility expenditures. If that is something the board wants to consider, that would adjust the current unassigned fund balance up to about 17% or $1.9 million. So about $100,000 increase in unassigned fund balance. Thinking about that and how the different scenarios impact future years' fund balances, if considerations were made to consider spending down some of those other fund balances and following along with the order of use policy, we would see an increase in next year's unassigned fund balance from the 14.8% up to about 15.6% or just under $1.8 million. Again, my job as a business manager and looking at the big picture is to offer these scenarios. Another consideration would be, again, where we carry that fund balance in Safe Schools to allocate the $37,000 that we receive in revenue every year to expenses that are state statute eligible. And then that, in addition to that consideration, would increase unassigned fund balance, again, depending on the scenarios, to 15.8% or little over $1.76 million. And then is that the last slide?
Yep.
So that's a lot of information. The district has almost a $15 million budget, when you take into account all of the funds. Of course, general fund is the largest of the district's budget, both revenue and expense. I look at all of the details in granular fashion, and so I present it as high level as I can, wanting to make sure that I'm not overlooking something that would be my job in the role that I have in the district. With that, I would welcome questions, insights, thoughts on the information I shared with you, whether it's a fund in the first presentation that itemizes out the different revenue and expenditures, this slide with regards to considerations, if any, that the board feels comfortable working towards, or anything else that you might want to talk about.
I have a couple of questions. When, would we need to decide, like, if we want to shift funds? Like, when should that approval of that happen?
So my recommendation would be sometime in June, which would be the June
Okay.
board meeting. Those types of considerations would need to be done by June 30th. Of this.
And the
fiscal
board
year.
has to approve the FY 25 budget, whatever that looks
Right.
like in June, or we can't function in June.
And then do we have any other assigned funds that are kind of floating around out there that we could look at possibly using if needed?
So we have two categories of the assigned funds. One is the reading specialist and the other is ROOF.
Okay,
So unless the board wants to consider assigning those funds in a different fashion, we would follow that current approval. What else?
Oh, one question, do you still have more?
no,
Sorry,
thank you.
okay. You had talked about under Fund 4, that we may get 40, or we're asking for 40 UPKC.
The
VPK,
voluntary pre-kindergarten, can I talk about this?
yes.
This is kind of my wheelhouse. That's actually, if we were to get those seats funded, you get 0.6 ADM, and that actually comes into Fund 1. So what would actually happen is we would take the expenses that are currently in, for like teacher expenses, that are currently in Fund 4, and they would go to Fund 1 to offset that revenue stream. That, funding stream was started in 2016. What year are we?
2020.
2016, because we got $1.9 million in my last district in 2017, and because we missed it the year before, so it's a newer funding stream that comes through the general fund.
So
it's
then-
for 4-year-old. Only
Yeah.
4-year-old.
Okay, so then I misspoke in that
Yeah.
it wouldn't increase community education revenue, however, it would decrease expense.
Correct. And you get everything associated with that. So you get transportation aid, just exactly how special education works, all of that aligns to that if we. And right now legislation, they're talking about 2,500 additional seats. So hopefully that gets through, and then maybe we'll have a better chance. Because they look at, free and reduced population as a big driver on who gets those dollars. So that's why we wouldn't have gotten much, or wouldn't have gotten it.
That was gonna be my next question, if we've gotten it before, if we've applied for it before.
Yeah, we did not have even close to what we would need for free and reduced population numbers,
But that's still not a guaranteed
and it's not guaranteed.
revenue stream.
We might not get those seats at all. And we don't, I do believe they're permanent in the legislation, but yeah, it hasn't passed yet. And even if it passes, it doesn't mean we won't get 4 seats.
I'm gonna take a left turn for just a second. How do we feel that the applications for free and reduced went this year? Not as good as it could have.
Now they're doing so much direct cert that I don't think we're gonna have as much of an issue of needing to have the form. You have to have the form because of the federal requirement with title. But where the state's coming through with dollars, they're knowing better because of the direct certification. So those that might have resource, getting support in other ways, it tells them. We're hoping to get away from the farm altogether, but they
Yeah,
haven't figured that solution out yet. I have a couple questions.
I have one
Oh,
more.
go ahead. Sorry, Maggie. I'll wait.
Can we talk about the one that's up there right now on that slide? So we have 49,000 assigned for the reading specialist.
We have 100 and
No, we have
70,000.
We only have 70,000 assigned.
Assigned.
It's 2 years because it's a part-time position.
Okay, so what would we do with that if this was a scenario, what would we do? Would we just get
Well,
rid
this
of
is a
that?
current reality.
That's a current reality,
Yeah,
but
so if you chose to cut that position, you could then realign those dollars in another way.
Do we foresee needing that position once we're through the READ Act?
No, I think we need to absolutely look at a different model. I do think the READ Act's gonna make a big. I think, let me say that differently. I think the letters training is going to make a big difference for our teachers. And so I do believe in the deal with that position. I have a few questions.
go ahead.
Ready? Ready for me?
I might have some later, but
All right.
I'm done.
I just want to verify that, so going into this preliminary budget, we're looking at a total deficit of around $250,000 from the general fund and the community ed fund both being in deficit. So
165 and 70, yeah,
can you pull the other? document?
Yes.
Yeah, one's 165, one's 71,000.
correct.
In the whole. So is that, as I'm looking at these numbers from the fiscal years previous, I guess I don't remember us being that far in the red, going into these budgets, especially when, we get the monthly budget reports and there's always that we're on track with our budget at 65% or whatever percent. So is this typical? Is this standard procedure to be in a deficit going into otherwise, or do we have to start looking at some cuts?
So your question is twofold in how I am hearing it.
Mhm.
I'll address the comment about this fiscal year's revised budget and the monthly board updates, and that as a percentage of the budget, we're on track.
Right.
That is the goal regardless of a surplus or a deficit. So we build a budget.
Yeah.
And then we track it monthly based on that budget. And it doesn't take into account. A budget is a budget, I guess, is what I'm saying. So we're a percentage of that budget, whether it's 400,000 surplus or $400,000 deficit. We're comparing the current month's information to the budget that we've set and the board approved.
Sure.
So the goal would be that we would set the budget and every month it's on track as a percentage of the budget. So at the end of the fiscal year, if this preliminary budget was approved, we would end the year at $165,000 deficit in general fund. We would end the year in food service as it's stated.
Yep.
Community ed, et cetera. So does that answer your question there?
Yeah,
As far as the comparison
yeah,
to current year's information as a percentage of the total budget?
right.
So that's that question. The other question you asked is it traditionally normal, if you will, to present a preliminary budget where we have deficits?
Mhm.
It depends. Because we could be deficit spending like we did in fiscal year FY 23. You can see we ended the year at almost $500,000 deficit spend. We had building projects where we spent down reserved fund balance. So we have a savings, if you will,
Mhm.
and we're spending some of that savings, which results in a deficit. In some years, we might have a surplus because we're spending less than what we're receiving. Similar in this fiscal year's preliminary projections. We're budgeting a deficit spend down in this case, the majority of it in unassigned dollars because one, we're projecting conservative revenue. If revenue is spot on, yes, we're gonna end up for the most part without taking into consideration reducing some expense.
Can you clarify for me? It's a little bit muddy waters when you compare, like, okay, so fiscal year 23, we're nearly 500,000 in the hole because we did these capital expenditures. But you say to the degree that we took money from savings to pay for that. So why would that make us then further in the hole? If we had money in savings or special funding allocated for those particular projects, would that be to our plus, to our benefit, to a, like, fiscally in our budget, then in our general budget, wouldn't that reflect that we had?
No, because those
Less
fund
spent.
balances have been built over previous years. And so I try to equate it to our own personal. If I have $10,000 in savings and I make $50,000 a year, or I have available to spend $50,000 of my budget, but I know I need to get a new furnace. I made 50,000, but I have 10,000 saved from previous years. I need to spend 60,000. So I'm a deficit 10,000 because I received those monies and savings have already been accounted for in previous years' results.
I think the key
Yeah.
for me
you
is I
can-
hate the language deficit spending because it sounds like, yeah, you're spending more than you have, when in reality, you had that money in capital, for example, and you chose to spend that money to get the HVAC done or whatever.
Right, in the accounting world, the term is
Yes,
deficit spend. This would be, I don't know how you wanna
yeah,
rephrase it in that we're spending down fund balance, which equates to savings.
Like you're thinking deficit as we overspent.
right, yeah, but that's how it presents itself, like we're overextended.
So it does, in the sense that compared to the revenues that we expect to come in.
Yeah.
So we expect to spend more money than what we have, so we're going to have to take out of savings in order to keep going with what we're doing.
Correct.
And that's what the board needs to decide. Do you want to do that for FY 25? You can, because you're still gonna be within your fund balance policy. That's what the board needs to decide. What do you want to do with this allocation of expenses for FY 25? And what we do for finally FY 24 affects the starting point of FY 25. So that's why she gave those other scenarios, just so you have information. You need to draw the conclusion of the best way to move forward. But that's the information I have to help guide your decision making.
So some thoughts on that, based on my experience working with several budgets in several different districts. There's, of course, the scenarios I shared, which would be just shifting how we use fund balance. Or there's the opportunity to consider coming back with a spending. Reduce expenditures or increase revenue or both end.
Do we have this topic on our work session
Or,
Yeah.
yeah,
for next week? Okay.
A question. So if we were shifting some of that money as you're proposing, does that change the total figure at the bottom, or are we just shifting around where it's deficit and where it's not deficit?
Correct, we're just shifting where we're using our savings, right? So we can use the unassigned savings of about 135,000, or because we have eligible expenses in those other reserved funds, restricted, we can, instead of using unassigned, use those, which aligns with board policy, which aligns with state statute, et cetera, et cetera.
And the nice thing is you don't have to we aren't making decisions tonight, so this is just information that we keep looking at tonight and next week and then decision.
So personally, I think it's a slippery slope to keep spending, right? If you look at our ADMs. They've got, I mean, do you have the slide or do we have numbers from what our ADMs have been the last few years and how much they've been dropping?
Well, they went way up last year and then they dropped this
But
year.
overall, we had, you go 2 or 3 years ago or whatever it was.
We don't have that,
We're down,
that
right? We don't have
information
it from
here
right now.
tonight, but we do have that
Yeah.
information.
And we see the numbers keep dropping and we're looking at deficit spending. I don't think, in my opinion, I don't think we want to do that. I think we can start looking at cutting somewhere, right? I mean, we haven't talked about cuts or stop spending money, right? It's always spend more money. We need to start talking about either pulling back on that, and getting this number down. I mean, I don't want to be spending money in the savings, right? I mean, we've got roof repairs we know that we're gonna need to do and all this stuff. If we keep spending 165,000 for the next 10 years in the deficit, that's, in my opinion, that's conservative with the way the numbers have been going, the way they've been trending lately. So if we don't stop spending that money, it's gonna go away really quick. So my opinion is let's try and save more money rather than take more money out of the savings until maybe we know where that number's at. Till we can get that number closer to zero. Instead of a negative number. That's my opinion.
And do we, okay, so I'm just trying to clarify some more understanding of this. This, when I started looking at this, it just seems to me like that's the first time I've seen that nearly $500,000 in the deficit for 23. You know, because the 22, I wasn't on the board, so I didn't know the financials for that year. Were we given that information and approved that before we moved along to the fiscal 24 budget? Like, I guess I don't remember seeing numbers that far in the deficit spending
That
before.
final
Yep.
numbers are audited financials. So the board did see that at the audit presentation and approved the audit.
So that comes through the audit.
It didn't, it wasn't what was budgeted, but
Right.
it is what was final.
But I think we did know that going into the end of that year because we saved like $130,000 from something. And we knew we were gonna keep that as an assigned balance to get a bus that year. So we knew like we saved up for a few years, kind of like we're doing for the roof. And in 10 years, when we have to spend that money on that roof, we're gonna be $1 million. We're gonna be $700,000 or $800,000 in the deficit spending. It's gonna show, but
It's gonna
only
show.
because we're using that.
Right, I was gonna show the deficit spent by 700,000 when we replaced the roof. Okay, so then for somebody who's not in the finance world, can we just talk turkey and tell like flat out, are we in the hole as a school district? Or are we, I'm not talking about our savings account, are we in a position, like several of the districts around us, where we have to start making serious cuts because we are going in the wrong direction? Like, that's what I would like to know when I'm approving a budget. Like, are we on track to be able to fund everything? And I understand it flexes with enrollment and all of these other funding streams that we've been discussing. But, I don't want it to hit us like a freight train that we were going the wrong direction for years and we could have course corrected and we didn't. So I never really get to see like, here's the black and white third grade math problem. Here's the revenues, here's how far we're in the plus or minus. Like,
So that information is if you go into the future, these slides, you can see here expenditure wise, each category. Where we're projecting expenditures. I don't code that in revenue because revenue is based on ADM, which we discussed, we're gonna project around 910. And then you take that into consideration with all of the resources that MDE and the federal government provides to projecting revenue. So for the most part, if we have our ADM number, that's how revenue is. But in expense, you can go category by category.
Right.
So this is your black and white.
Yeah.
What is included in each of those different categories now, of course, is more detail than we have here tonight. As far as your question on what does the board need to consider or what is comfortable to the board? The policy is what dictates our unassigned fund balance, so that's 14 to 20%. Is the board comfortable with 14%? Or is the board comfortable with 20% or plus? So that's, I provide the information, I share with you how I've come up with the information. The board then directs the district, in essence, the work that I do and the collaboration I do with administration, to bring a budget that meets policy, statute, and board direction. Does that answer your question?
So this was the 14%, and then she gave some other options to get that up.
Sure.
14 to 20, the 14 to 20%, is that statute? No, or is that
No,
our, that's our.
That's most districts, for example, in the metro run around, they're happy when they have 6%. I would not entertain that because we do not have an operating referendum, so I would never support that ever here. But fund balances are, policies are different across all districts.
I have been given by several different audit firms, when you're considering a fund balance that would prove to be consistent and sufficient is about 3 months of operating expense. So if you take, all of our expenses, some firms will take out capital, others keep it in. I've always kept it in because that's the conservative approach to including all expense. If you take, what is it, 11,500,000 divided by 12 times it by 3. That would be something to consider. But every district is different. We have to take into consideration what those uniquenesses are in every district.
So Maria, when I first got on the board, Keith was governor of Minnesota. They did all them legislative funding shifts. Creative funding shifts where they shifted money that they should have paid in June to like August or whatever. And then you had a lot of the local school districts that had to go out for a loan from a bank to pay their bills because they didn't have. So that's where, to have that couple months of operating revenue, really, if that would ever happen again, and they've done it before, so it could happen, and none of us can really do anything about that, but that's where this can come into play, and also you could have a boiler go out or something else, but that's where I seen as a board member, that's where I seen a big need for the fund balance.
So what percentage do you think we should target then? 14 to 20 is a big range. Is there like, what's our 3 months roughly? What percent of that would?
11 divided by 3 is what, 3.5 million? Yeah, 3 million. So we're far from that number. Again, it depends on the year and what mandates we have through legislation, depends on the needs of the students and what is expected there. I mean, I that's not an answer that I can provide, other than the fact if I take into account historical trends. 18% is what I would consider a realistic number. But that can shift too, in any given year, as board member Hackett mentioned, we might need a boiler and then we have to spend the fund balance down. And in the next fiscal year, legislation might increase funding in certain areas and our fund balance goes back up. So it's monitoring current reality with a 3 to 5 year forecasted outlook on projections.
So it looks like though we should be working on getting ours up. We're on the low end.
Which, if we did look at some of those scenarios and considerations, we could be over 17%. as compared to 14.8.
Do you have a slide with the fund balance on there, where we're at?
Yes, next slide down. That a little bit smaller. Oh, yeah, that jumped me down. You can bring it just a little bit. So, yeah, so left to right, final year FY 23 based on audited results. The yellow portion is current year fiscal year 24 projections based on the revised budget approved, with the exception of reallocating those assigned funds. So we have an unassigned fund balance projected at just over 1.8 million or 16.2%. Now taking into consideration projections for next fiscal year's preliminary numbers, that drops mainly because we are spending unassigned dollars instead of spending down those remaining fund balances on the far right in that upper section. So there's there's a fund balance for professional development. I believe, scroll over to the left.
We plan to spend more though.
No, that's capital.
Yeah,
Sorry.
capital.
Operating capital and LPFM are two fund balances that, depending on the district's current facilities and or curriculum rotation, I like to maintain operating capital for those reasons. And it has stayed fairly consistent year over year, as you can see there, operating capital. LTFM, I recommend maintaining a fund balance there to the extent as much as we can, knowing that 50% of that is going to pay our facilities bond for the next 10 years,
Yeah.
10 to 12 years. And we have annual ongoing maintenance that also spends that down. So those two categories, operating capital and LTFM, I say maintain some consistency.
So one thing I will comment, however, is we do right now have 150 in capital, and one thing to consider is you could maybe bring that down to 100. And utilize that 50 for some other expenditures, then ups your unassigned fund balance some too, to get you up to that higher percent. Because your key is having that unassigned fund balance running in that higher mark between the 14 and 20.
And then the other is
The safe schools.
safe schools of about 116,000 as projected. And that fund is growing over consistently year over year because we are not allocating eligible expenses to that fund. So it's basically napkin math. If you take 1.7 million and move some of those expenses up to one of those reserved fund balances, it directly increases the other. So your expenses stay the same, it's just moving the expenses to different pots.
So the operating and safe schools, basically we're leaving money in our checking account and using savings instead.
Correct.
With safe schools, are we supposed to spend down a certain amount? Or is that up to the district?
It's up to the district. I've never known a district that ever didn't spend it all the time. All of those funds get spent. Because that's why they give them to you. Again, holding off on LTFM and capital just because you're building, you never know when something goes out, but all those other ones we spend out. So that's why PD funds we spend out, because that's why they give you those dollars. Is to use them. They aren't meant to build up unless you have some big project you wanted to do or something, but they're really not designed to be built up. That's what your unassigned fund balance is for.
Correct.
That's where you want to build your.
We had talked about the safe schools for the rekeying and all of that, but then we wanted to hold off until we had the SRO discussion to determine those funds. Are we gonna know numbers at the work session for like SRO to help this piece too?
Yeah, I know for full time, he has already told me it's around 60,000.
All from us, or is
Yeah.
that's our portion? That's our portion. Okay.
And just keep in mind,
That's a full time, so not everybody has full time. I just.
depending on what the board decides, we only receive about 37,000 in
Right,
safe
here.
schools, so depending on what that scenario might look like, again, we're increasing expense, which then is going to decrease our unassigned fund balance, in addition to obviously some of those assigned fund or reserved funds. And that's in my experience, that expense is an ongoing expense, so we're using, ongoing revenue that doesn't quite meet the total expense of that, which then
Unless you did,
compile.
like, we get 37,000, so you just use 37,000 to fund that, so that's whatever time that means, you know what I mean, in your buildings, that's what it would pay. Do you see where I'm going?
Yep,
'Cause
but
then-
that's
yeah.
just what you.
And currently, the district already has eligible expenses that could be coded there, that are already ongoing expenses.
We get like the last 5 years of unassigned fund balance percentages for our work session. I go back 5 years and see what we had for unassigned fund balance, and then the last 5 years of ADM as well, for the work session.
Yes.
Are you looking for the average by year or like by month each year?
For ADM, you're saying? I would say
Just the average over the year?
average over the year, that's fine, yeah.
I think that makes most sense.
Thank you.
That'd be a
Well, I just wanted to make sure, because
Yeah.
if you're looking for
Thank you for
specific
that.
information, that's
Average over the year, so.
Yeah,
And that's what MDE publishes every year as well,
Right.
the average.
Okay.
A dumb question, but
Yeah.
has, I have lots of them. Has our reimbursement, like per ADM, kept up with inflation? Like, I know a lot of our increases in salaries and wages, which
Yeah.
I'm assuming we're getting less than, but we have to keep paying people more. Is that what's
Correct.
happening?
correct. And what happened is they did approve now an inflationary factor on our funding, but it caps at 3%. And it's, the minimum is at 2%, so you're guaranteed 2%. Or if you have inflation, you'll get 3. So if your inflation's at 7%, which we've been experiencing high, it still doesn't, it's right. you're
So
still
and
going back.
that's effective fiscal year 26.
Right,
The other point of your question, which was definitely not a dumb question, a very real question, is inflation. So MDE, state aid, federal aid has not kept up with inflation since dating back to the early 2000s. Enough that the gap has grown that the local levies have been the need to increase to offset that inflation, but yet we're still, like Dr. Werkamperman said, 3% total inflationary increase in aid doesn't meet the current 7 to 8% inflation, and our local levies can't make up that additional 5 to 6%.
which is why so many districts have operating referendums, so that they have another form of income generation coming in. Whereas about 90 districts don't, and we're one of those. And there's quite a few in that, this central and then into the north.
And from what I know, having just started in November, but currently our district is maximizing our levies to what the statute allows. So we, unless we, as you said, consider some sort of other revenue stream that is either non-voter or voter approved for operating specifically, this is our reality.
The last thing I want to see is any teacher positions getting cut or any staffing positions period being cut. And the last thing I also want to see is going out and asking the voters for more money, honestly. Because I think that this community, before I arrived here, but from what I've learned since being here, is this community felt taxed out when we did this addition. And we're still paying that. I don't think anybody in the town wants to throw more money in the pot. And I think it would be just ill-advised, given the current taxes climate that we live in, to bring any more expenditure and strain on families that live in this community. So those are the two things that I would like to avoid when we talk turkey about these budgets. I don't want to head down that road, as I see many districts around us doing.
Right, and I respect what you're saying. I don't disagree with what you're saying. However, our largest expenses are salaries and benefits. And if you look at the categories, if you go up one more slide, we're actually spending down in some of those categories that we can control. So supplies and materials, sorry, we're, spending $155,000 less than what we're projected to spend this year. A lot of that has to do with a right sizing of our non-instructional supplies. And then it also has an account into our curriculum for next fiscal year is much less because the rotation is Phi-Ed and Spanish. So that changes year over year depending on the curriculum rotation. So right there, and then the other part of that is student activities is included in there. So student activities has the availability to spend as much as they have in their fund balance, and so that fluctuates. So, I mean, there we're already, reducing expense as much as we can, and then everywhere else, fees for services, projecting remaining flat. We will see some savings there depending on some of the decisions we make with outside services. And then our capital expense, that includes a bus. And so we need to, based on statute, take into consideration our current fleet and what statute allows based on state audit of our vehicle fleets. And so that can fluctuate depending on year over year. So our majority of our increase is 4% in salaries and wages and 2.5% in employee benefits. And that's what it is based on our current staff and our current contracts.
So if we look at salaries and wages there from FY 22, we're $900,000 more, right? And that's definitely more than a 3% increase each year. So where have we added $900,000 in salaries and wages?
Well, it's compounded. So every year you're compounding the previous year's expense. And so you're right, it's not just 3% overall, but every single year you're compounding.
Right. Yeah, so I guess I would like to see if there has been anything added and what level is it at? Is it adding teachers? Is it adding more coaching, or where's that at? Where, if we have less ADMs, I keep going back to that because that's where we get our revenue from. That's where we get our money. And if we've added coaches or we've added teachers or we've added administration or whatever, but we have less students, why do we still have the same amount of everything there? You know what I mean?
Just know though, I do say, last year we were really high on as compared to previous years, and so we didn't add staff. The only staff person we added was the egg person, and 35% of that salary comes out of CTE funds.
From 22, that's the only person we've added?
Yeah, teacher, we added and a
Overall.
preschool teacher.
I'm talking overall. I'm talking from administration down. What have we added from 22? That's what I'd like to see. Because it's our responsibility to comb through our expenses before we would ever go out and ask for more money. We have to say, hey, this is why we have to spend this much money on salaries and wages, because we need it for this, this, and this.
Right.
And like I said, I'm looking $900,000 over the past 3 years, 1, 2, 3. it's over 900,000. Me, I guess I would like to see what's been added from administration all the way down to whoever you want to say is on the bottom. I don't want to say who's on the bottom, but
Community ed, like part-time positions, like that.
anything,
But this is general fund only, so
Yeah, this is
community ed
general fund.
isn't.
right, anything out of the general fund, yeah.
Sure.
And I think the key too is another way to raise revenue is to increase students. So.
And staffing models are unique in that because we've decreased enrollment doesn't mean that we can decrease staff accordingly because one staff person might be supporting, and I'm throwing numbers out here, I don't know policy as far as class sizes though, but one teacher could last year been supporting 30 students in the class and now is supporting 22 students. There's not, you can't just take away that staff person, there's still students in those classes. And so ways to think about salaries and wages would be attrition. Do we have staff across the board, right? Not any one department or one type of position, but do we have staff that are considering retiring or going somewhere else? And at that point in time, does that position need to be replaced? Those are things to consider for future decrease in expense, et cetera. But yes, this would be an overall picture of how do we right size expense based on policy and student needs. How do we increase revenue and or both? And what, if any, is the board comfortable in using some of those fund balances?
Can I open one more can of worms? Does this number then include unemployment pay and all the expense from the READ that we have to incur for 25? That's why we
Projected
include that?
in there, yes.
Okay,
And we, so far, we'll see if the state has enough money to offset those unemployment. When the midterm unemployment, when they take summer, for example. There's money there, whether it will be enough to cover all of the state this year again, we don't know. Last year it did. People are projecting that it might not, so.
But this doesn't reflect them covering that, this is us covering that.
No, this reflects us, them covering it.
Covering.
For
Yes.
fiscal year 25.
Okay.
So it's expense revenue neutral in the projection.
and do we have numbers now after our first, like, last year was the pilot year, right? That people could go out for unemployment. Do we have some sort of numbers that we can now envision or work with? Like,
Yes.
what are?
I
What
don't know
are-
off the top of my
Right,
head what
I
that
don't.
total amount was. It was over 80,000
Oh,
for between terms, which was summer non-licensed staff claims. Unemployment claims.
and that eventually will then be our fiscal responsibility.
Correct.
Because that is going to, whatever money's left next year, whatever you get, and then it's dried up.
Which is
Correct.
really a different scenario as well, because before that, when people file unemployment, like just a regular unemployment, we can levy for that. So you do, and they won't allow it with this, in between term. So that's a different factor as well, that we have not addressed. So they offer a benefit without giving a revenue source for it.
I think it's a good first look. I appreciate the discussion. I really do. Anything else for Heidi? All right,
Thank
thank
you.
you. so much.
Excited. You can stay up for this next one. So next item.
Yep. So, lunch at,
So it's $11,374.
Which if we write it off, will put us further into deficit spending. I didn't regret like that one.
By 11,000.
But
It's included in the,
I also think
Revised
it has
budget.
to just get done.
Yeah.
Because
She
It's
you
from
included it in the
2011.
revised, she included it in the revised budget, so.
Yeah, I'm gonna motion approve. Let's just take care of it.
I'll second that motion.
Director Bowman. Director Hackett. Discussion.
We were able to recover some, right?
Yeah, a little bit.
Oh, like, oh, not like the fence.
A little, no,
what was it?
couple hundred.
5,
Yeah,
600?
I don't think it got to a vote.
No,
Um,
there was one.
Still good.
Yeah.
One debt that they just overlooked according to the conversation and they made in full, which was a larger amount.
That's great. Any other discussion? All right, all in favor, say aye.
I,
Aye. Opposed? Abstaining? Motion carries. All right, exit interviews.
So we talked about this. So I just pulled this together here for tonight to continue. If you want to move forward with this. So here were the questions that we talked about and we decided on, I believe we decided the first two. And then go to the next. So this is what, when I took the notes from our conversation, we came up with what is a primary reason you chose to withdraw your students? What, if any, other factors impacted this decision? So I threw together a letter and then a questionnaire, just as sample drafts, you can change whatever is necessary. And then, so if you look at the letter first, just, you know, whoever, people. And then, Royalton Public Schools is sending its correspondence to all families who live in the Royalton School District who have chosen another educational opportunity for their students. We have included a brief questionnaire with a self-addressed step. So this is where I thought we could get at the anonymity of it. Is there's no name on the questionnaire and they would have a self-addressed stamped envelope. So we'd have our address on both, so we wouldn't know who it's coming from. For your convenience, in order to provide anonymity, there's no identifying information requested on the questionnaire. However, if you prefer to talk to someone, give contact information. So the questionnaire just had, what is the primary reason you chose to withdraw? What, if any, other factors impacted this decision? Is there anything else you'd like us to know? And I took that from what we had discussed at the work session, but we can change it. And I put my information, spell my name on. I forget to say, but I'll fix that.
It was a very busy day.
But I gave them that information in case they wanted to reach out. But this way it would be anonymous and they don't have to worry about. And then they don't have to return it. If they aren't interested in a response, they don't have to respond.
I like the idea that there's no technology barriers that. You know. As long as you have a good mailing address, you know.
I would just, can I suggest one nuance? So when I read the letter, and if I didn't sit in any of these conversations, I have this letter in my mailbox, I'd be like, what's the point of this? So I thought of adding one sentence, like, so to the degree, like, we would love your feedback to help us improve the district. So they kind of know the intent and purpose of being reached out to. We want to know what, obviously why you left, but
Maybe that should be the lead
our
sentence.
goal is we want to improve.
Yeah, it should be the lead out
District.
sentence,
I don't know how.
as an effort to improve our district.
And I could say we would appreciate.
Would you take it even a little further and say the school board? So they know it was,
I thought we couldn't.
we can't contact.
He just didn't want them to contact.
We can still say that we're
Could say that.
requesting.
So they know
For
it's
sure.
more or less coming from the school
Yes.
board versus.
Yeah, we sure.
I don't-
could. Yeah, I mean,
I think that would be.
I'll
be fine with
I'll
that.
add a, why don't I do this? I'll add a sentence. I'll do a little wordsmithing. And I'll email you. Well, I don't, can't have a decision.
Yeah,
Do you trust me that I can wordsmith this sentence and send it out? Okay, yeah, because I don't want to have us, we can't do that email,
no,
you know.
So I'm gonna motion to approve with the updated additional sentence.
Okay.
Director Bellman. Second by Director Groves. Any other discussion? I'm good with those 3 sentences. I wasn't here for the work session, but it was. That was everything I could find online from different surveys other schools have done for some similar things like that, so. That was a conglomeration of those. All right, all in favor, say aye.
I,
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. All right, CMERDC,
So we talked about this as well. I just want to bring it back for formal approval, requesting to move from CMERDC to Region 1. CMERDC's had an increase of annually of 30% increase in fees. They have high staff turnover resulting in decreased support and service. Elimination of some supports and offerings and an unwillingness to meet our needs. It just hasn't been good since 2021 November. Strengths of Region 1, they 17,300 for Region 1 as compared to 18,000, so we saved some money. Also CMERDC charges for additional training, whereas they wouldn't. They provide consolidated costs and support and service. They have tenured staff with a willingness to offer solutions that are really big on customer service, time and response, and available for one-on-one support. And Heidi could answer any other questions too, if you have any about Region 1 as compared to CMERDC. She works the most.
how many of our staff would use the support tool?
That's our business office, so our payroll person, Heidi, a lot. And then, a little bit of HR stuff. Like the W2.
Is that, I'm just wondering, like, is that a monthly thing? Is that a quarterly thing that we need some training or need something like that?
So it depends on a few different variables. Certainly monthly, we would look to at least one-off support for questions with regards to all sorts of whether it's finance or HR related. Quarterly, depending on more so probably the HR side of quarterly reportings, 941 tax forms, unemployment reporting, things like that, that if a new staff person didn't know all of the details, annually for sure, with regards to just fiscal year end, fiscal year start.
They also manage our smart software, so we can't use our smart system.
So it just depends. The more tenured a district business office staff is, doesn't necessarily equate to less need of support. Also, changes in legislation can bring about a need for a lot of additional support. The support model with CMERDC changed in fiscal year 22, which would be July of 2021 through June of 2022. Due to some staffing changes at that time. Many tenured staff chose to resign. New leadership came in as a subsequent event, and those models of support changed and or they added fees for those support services, whereas my workings with Region 4, which is the southwest, west central area of Minnesota, and Region 1, which is that Moorhead area, that is not the case. Now, there could be fees associated with one-off exceptions. Maybe we have certain scenarios that are taking place, but in general, the model of finance, HR, payroll, smart support services is included in Region 1 and Region 4.
I was just looking at, we're gonna save $1,000 by going to them, but like in April, we had $262 that we paid to CMERDC, or I'm assuming for that. So if we're anywhere near that, you're looking at about $3,000 that we're gonna save just by not spending that monthly as well. That's what I was looking at, is how much more could we save by not having to pay for that training and that stuff and the help.
And not only tangible savings, but intangible when it comes to, for example, Region One does a lot of behind the scenes work in a proactive measure that helps support year-end payroll processes, year-end financial processes. They do things differently. That would be a benefit on the time and effort side that we put forth here in the business office.
I think we asked this, but there's no disruption of services or.
Correct. It, based on others that I've talked to, other business managers that have transitioned in regions, specifically to Region One. The goal would be to shut down, as of the end of business day on a Friday. Region One gets the information from this region that they're moving from, CMERDC, and by Monday morning, we're back up and running, and the only thing different is we're using a different URL to log in.
I make the motion to approve the move the CMERDC to Region One. From CMERDC to Region One. Is there a second?
Second.
Director Bowman? Discussion? Any more discussion? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. All right, mid-state to Midco.
So we talked about this too at the work session, just looking to move away from mid-states technology services. They range anywhere from $20,000 to $27,000 a year, moving to Midco. Again, we don't use their tech support, but we're paying for that FTE, a portion of that FTE. We don't use the ITV anymore like they did back then, so that doesn't support us either. So if we go to Midco, the cost for that would be down to $4,512 after our E-rate. So we're saving anywhere from $15,000 to $22,000 by making this move. However, in saying that, currently the joint powers requires 18 months of notice before you can get out. So I'm asking if we might go to their board and say, we shouldn't have to wait 18 months. Maybe have that conversation.
Absolutely. We just did that for work.
ACFE.
Yep.
Okay.
That's what it was.
We don't, switching shouldn't affect like. We should, like, you're not foreseeing any problems with connectivity or.
Nope.
Everything.
For bandwidth.
We'll actually have more bandwidth than what we're getting with
And
state.
Holding Ford and Long Prairie, they both left mid-state and went to Midco, and we're pleased with them.
Yep.
Correct. This is also an example on the budget that we're projecting for next fiscal year, and that category fees for services where I projected a flat amount. These are some of the savings that are resulting in this outcome.
Mr. Chair, I'll move this for adoption.
All right. Motion by Director Hackett, second by Director Crowe. Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstaining? Motion carries. All right, Spanish trip proposal.
Chair Hofstad, members of the board, Superintendent Dr. Werekamp. This is a proposal for a Spain 2025 trip next June. Paid for totally by the students. This would be a combination trip with a Spanish group from Mora High School. We would be kind of pairing together on that trip. Itinerary is is there, and it's, really some neat things involved with it. It will not involve students missing any time from school. And the students are paying for the trip if they decide to go. Because it's overnight travel, it requires board approval. Or out-of-state travel. Overnight, out-of-state, out-of-country.
So many variables. So it doesn't cost the school anything and it's not during school time. I will move that. Is there a second?
Yeah.
Second by Director Roaring. Any discussion?
Curious to know how many kids are interested in it.
We will. Thursday night at 5:30, there is a preliminary meeting on this pending.
Planning board approval.
Yeah, then we'll know.
So we'll approve their meeting and,
Yeah,
all right,
please do.
all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, abstained. Motion carries. Thank you. All right, approval of donations by resolution. So, this is what I talked about a little bit during my comments, but, what a great thing. So I will introduce the resolution, walk through them here quickly. Royalton Fire Relief has generously donated $3,000 to the Royalton Middle School High School robotics team to be used for registration, supplies, tournament fees, and or travel expenses. Burnix has generously donated 27 cases of Gatorade and water for our track and field team. The Royalton American Legion has graciously donated $500 to the Business Professionals of America Club to develop their program. The Royalton American Legion has graciously donated $2,500 to the robotics team for registrations, supplies, tournament fees, and or travel expenses. The Royalton Lions Club has kindly donated $1,000 to the robotics club to further their program. The Initiative Foundation has generously given Miss Brenny a grant awarded in the amount of $170 to support the Robots and Books project. The rest of these are all Initiative Foundation. So they gave Miss Toma a grant awarded in the amount of $320 to support the Lego education kits. A grant to Miss Billig in the amount of $450 to support the preschool STEAM project. Given to Mrs. Scott, a grant awarded in the amount of $520 to support the enhancing classroom engagement. Mrs. Ekman received a grant awarded in the amount of $530 to support the art room and creative minds. The Initiative Foundation has given Miss Garrett's a grant awarded in the amount of $1,000 to support the set of microscopes. To Miss Chern, a grant awarded in the amount of $1,000 to support increasing independence. And to Miss Brenny, a grant awarded in the amount of $1,013 to support grade 2 flex seating renovation. So motion for adoption was seconded by member.
Second.
By Director Bauman. And on a roll call vote,
Director Hackett,
Aye.
Director Hofstad,
aye.
Director Trout,
Aye.
Director Bauman,
Aye.
Director Boyd,
Aye.
Director Roy, same.
All right. 5 in favor, 1 abstain, so motion carries 6-0. All right, thank you.
Thank you for the teachers that, took the time to write the grants. Are we supporting that in any way? Well, like,
Encouraging it. Yeah, we.
Yeah,
depend on
you know,
either principals. Yep.
Yeah. that's really nice, because I mean, these are the ones that got funded, not everyone got funded probably, so it's great to see them going out for it, it's just helping the kids, you know.
All right, policy. So we have, first policy readings, that we're adding, and second policy readings that we are gonna continue. There's quite a bit of work that needs to be done on some of these, so they're gonna sit at second reading for probably a couple meetings, I would guess. So we have a second and final policy reading due to minor changes, and that is to 802, the disposition of obsolete equipment and material. And that was just a law changes, to a reference in the back. We have 209, which is the code of ethics. There was no change to that. That was a yearly review. 206 is public participation in school board meetings, complaints about persons at school board meetings and data privacy considerations. They changed it from a CFR to the new statute, which is 260 echo, and a new form that contains that on there. That was the only change, is the reference there. And then 406, so public and private personnel data and the form of consent to release, request from an individual. So they wrote out CFR and the Minnesota statute, and that was the only change to that one. And then 420. So that one we're taking to a final reading. So is there a motion to approve the second and final policy readings for 802, 209, 206, 406, and 420?
So moved.
By Director Hackett. Thank you.
Second.
Second by Director Bauman. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. All right, and approval of third policy reading. So there's three moves. The first one is 509 enrollment of non-resident students. And the non-resident enrollment law changed. Makes no change to our policy, the way it's written, or how we have been doing things. 205 is open meetings and closed meetings. They wrote out the numbers and statute, and told us that we had to have an expiration date for specialty meeting requests. So that is in there. And then the last one is 410, the family and medical leave policy. So that was an annual update, and the update was all the stuff that changed in statute. So that is what I'm tracking for those three policies. Can I get a motion to approve the third policy readings of 509, 205, and 410? By Director Trout.
Second.
Second by Director Bauman. Thank you. Any discussion on those three? All right, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. All right.
That means that it's not correct. I'm not sure what happened there,
Nope.
but that's not even supposed to be accurate. So
I've got finance, is Wednesday, May 22nd at noon, or at, I think, policy.
is that 1 p.m. on May 22nd?
We have work session 20 minutes at the
May 20.
and then our regular meeting June 10th at 6.
And we had the strategic planning committee on June 24th,
At what time?
6 p.m.
All right, so we have our work session, 20 May at 1800. Our finance, 22 May at 1200. Policy, 22 May at 1300. 10 June at 6 p.m. Sorry. 24 June at 6 p.m. for that. That was for strategic planning.
Yes.
All right. All right. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So a motion to adjourn at 7:59 by Director Hackett,
Second.
second by Director Ryan. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Motion carries. All right.